Hello, everyone. Happy April. Let's get right into it. Talk about the books I read in March 2026. I read 3 books this month, and let's just really get into it. Follow me on Goodreads at Aaliyah Langley. I also mentioned last month, I think, that I started a Storygraph page. You can find me there at Aaliyah Langley as well. All that stuff out the way. Let's get it going. I'm sat here. I've just finished this edit, and I realized I didn't do my customary welcome. So welcome to those who haven't been here before. Welcome back to those who have watched before. Thanks for coming again. Back to it. What do these 4 books I have here, what do these books all have in common? And how are they all related to the books I read in March 2026? Well, all of these books are written by authors whose books I read this month. And the very first one that we're going to talk about is the 10th book for the year, and the first book of March is Half His Age by Jennette McCurdy. This is a novel. I read Jennette McCurdy's first ever book in her memoir, I'm Glad My Mom Died, when it came out a couple years ago. And this book was absolutely amazing. Even me getting this copy was like such a feat. I remember when the book came out, it was getting exceptional reviews. And I was like, man, I want to read this book. But it literally was like, no, you could not get a copy of the book. And someone got me this book as a gift. And I was like, oh, awesome. And I finished the book and I dove right into it right away. And I read this book very quickly. This is a book I highly, highly recommend. The title and everything like that is quite shocking to people, and even like the confetti-filled urn. But excellent book. So when I found out that she was coming out with the memoir, I was like, with a novel, her first novel, I was like, oh, this sounds exciting. Like, this was a great memoir. Let me jump in and read this, right away. Let's go for it. I read it. I kind of was like, okay, I saw some interesting reviews on it, kind of initially, like soft reviews. It obviously wasn't as much as a standout as the memoir was. And I read it quite quickly. It's a pretty short book. And yeah, I gave that book a 3 out of 5. I actually initially gave it a 3.5 out of 5. And then I degraded it to a 3 out of 5, partly because of the other books I read this month. I was like, I can't have that be on the same tier. And I remember when I read the book, like it was like towards the beginning of the month, and I put in my Goodreads, and I believe I put in my Storygraph as well. Like I have this article, this book review from New York Magazine, written by Fran Hofner. I was like, I could say more about this book, but pretty much everything I feel about this book is in this review. And the review is, again, New York Magazine by Fran Hofner, and it is titled, Can Jennette McCurdy Transcend Provocation? I'm going to link it below. Now, I remember before I read the book, I briefly saw on Twitter someone like save this and say like, this is exactly how I felt the book, and I like just saved it, and I was like, I'll maybe read it after I read the book. And I read the book, and I was like, oh yeah, let me see that review that someone was talking about. See if like I happen to, and I was like, this is literally what I was feeling the entire way. So I'm literally going to just like read this review to you now, because, and I might add some more at the end here, but I want to just literally read the review to you. And especially if you're someone who has read this book, Half His Age, you probably will like right away be like, oh, okay, like I'm tracking with what you're saying or something, So yeah, this is what I have. It starts with, or what she has, what they have rather. I mean, not to say it's mine. There's a lot of sex in Jennette McCurdy's debut novel, Half His Age, more than you might otherwise expect. The former Nickelodeon star and I'm Glad My Mom Died author strives for discomfort as her protagonist, Waldo, a 17-year-old student in Alaska, has sex again and again and again with her, I'm going to add some emphasis a little bit, with her 40-year-old English teacher, Mr. Corgi. Half His Age is in endorsing their relationship. Anyone even a little bit familiar with McCurdy's writing knows that she's compelled by female rage and the way young women are used and discarded. So much of Half His Age, however, leans on that using and discarding as a repeated narrative beat to show us how poorly Waldo, who is the character, the 17-year-old girl, is treated and how cheap she thinks of herself as being. With little to no foil for this dismaying experience, however, Half His Age often succumbs to shock value in lieu of pushing beyond which often offends. Waste is a tenet of Half His Age. Waldo can't locate a sense of self-worth amid the squalor and rubble that is her life. Her mother is a negligent sex and love addict who can't prioritize her daughter over a date. Waldo spends her evenings alone at home, clicking around on the Sephora website. He works at Victoria's Secret, but all that money goes towards more online shopping, all of which fuels her need to make herself more desirable. she has and dumps various boyfriends, none of whom can satisfy her urges. Sexual attraction is not what draws Waldo to her teacher. Instead, it's her desire to be around someone so unlike herself and so unavailable. Unlike her fast food and cosmetics, Mr. Corgi is not immediately accessible. Corgi only resists Waldo's advances for so long, the two of them more or less coupling up by the time the school year hits Thanksgiving break. McCurdy writes their sex scenes with a lurid fervor as Waldo gets off the idea of her own youth. Lolita narratives are nothing new in fiction, but the only thing McCurdy really challenges is the point of view. Waldo's attraction to Corgi is genuine insofar as the character is aware of herself, but the relationship does not really develop because both characters are stuck in an arrested development. Waldo has no point of reference for male authority figures before him. She was raised without a father and cannot summon much respect for her peers. She's bored of her classmates, including Nolan, a guy who might actually be good for her. When Waldo goes to meet his family, she immediately dismisses their stability. Quote here from the book. It's their settled eyes, their understanding head nods, their courteous, boundaried phrasing. This explains Nolan. Waldo says, another quote here, people who come from functioning families just don't have the same charge as the rest of us. End quote. Waldo knows that might be bullshit, another quote here. Maybe it's just a false narrative I cling to. But rather than unpack that, she once again falls in line with Corgi, and McCurdy shifts back into writing repetitive sex scenes and tedious descriptions of both characters' desperate physical identities. We only need to know so many times how hot Waldo is compared to Corgi's dumpy frame. All of this might feel a little more nuanced and palatable if Corgi were less of a stereotype. Quote here, after we eat, we cuddle up and Corgi pops on a movie he wants me to see, some art house movie or foreign film that he reminds me we'd never be able to watch if it is not for his Criterion Channel subscription, as if the subscription is something exclusive you have to be invited into and not something that costs $11 a month, Waldo recounts. Another quote here, while we watch, he relays his thoughts like they're the director's cut commentary, and I struggle to keep my eyes open, end quote. He wants Waldo to keep up with, quote here, Chekhov and Tolstoy and George Saunders, as well as Bergman and Kubrick and Kurosawa, the great Akira Kurosawa, one of my favorites, Japanese director. For all of the depth and contradiction that McCurdy wants, grants Waldo, Corgi is frustratingly one note. If there were less to him to contend with in a novel, that might not be as big of an issue, but he is unfortunately ever present. McCurdy doesn't have to make him all well-rounded or even remotely sympathetic character, especially when he's cheating on his wife with a literal child, but his outsized presence in the book starts to detract more than it does complicate or enrich the narrative. Quote, I think we can afford more nuance and gray area, end quote. McCurdy said, but there's no grayness to Corgi at all. McCurdy shines when she's writing about anything but Corgi. Waldo's undeveloped relationship with her mother and her best friend, kind of Franny, deserved more examination. One of them ignores her and the other smothers her, but these female relationships wind up being the most foundational of any of Waldo's interactions. Corgi, stuck in stereotype and immaturity, holds Waldo back, both narratively and emotionally. Their sex scenes are designed to alienate readers, McCurdy repeatedly emphasizing how wrong it all is, but they also eat up a lot of the novel's oxygen, such that shock value starts to become its only value. And I'm glad my mom died, her memoir. McCurdy goes back and forth between scenes of shockingly graphic nature with how she navigated the public, like screaming phone calls from her mom when she popped up on TMZ, in private and private ongoing identity crisis aspect of her childhood stardom. Waldo, despite being the novel's narrator, shows us only one side of herself. Only as she starts to wake up to the limits of what Corgi can provide does half her age start to subvert readers' expectations. But by then, the book is nearly over. Quote, the sex has never been just about sex, Waldo explains. It's been about what the sex has communicated to me. And end quote here. The same can be said of half his age. Once the sex stops, the conversation can actually begin. I know I read that whole thing and it wasn't that long, but that literally is, as I said, I don't have anything else to really add there because everything I was feeling while reading the book, before I even read this review at all, while reading the book, I was having these same things, and literally at the end of the book, when Waldo was finally, as is said in this New York Magazine review, as Waldo begins to pull away and realize like the situation with Corgi actually isn't what it is, and like starts to wake up to like those kind of things, is when the book starts getting really quite interesting and really kind of quite like, I want to see what's going on here. But then I literally reading the book, I had it on Kindle, so I had it on my iPad. I'm holding like I'm flipping pages. I had it, and I literally was like, this book is literally about to end, but this is now what I would rather be interested in, rather than, like, it is very sex-filled. It is very, like, you know, intense in that way. And like it says, maybe it can be designed to alienate readers, whatever, but it's kind of like, you know, as kind of laid in this book, like maybe some of that shock value is what she was going for a lot. So I was kind of like left disappointed a bit with it. Obviously, like Jennette has talked about in her press for I'm Glad My Mom Died, and even for this book as well, she had a situation where she was like someone who was like around this age, and she was dating someone who was much older than her. I think it might have been someone who she worked on in one of her shows previously, and kind of talking about like being able to grow up now and like look back at those relationship dynamics and look at it in a different way. And we've had many people who, like just recently, Keke Palmer and Demi Lovato, I think, talked about the situation that they were similar in, where they were like grown because they were like doing these adult jobs, like acting as like a younger person, but like, why am I dating someone much older and whatever? And obviously this is like a school relationship as well, like a teacher and a student who's like about to graduate, all types of things. But it really, the book really begins to like, when the book really starts to like really get to where you're thinking like, okay, great, like let's hold on to this, and then the book's ending and it's like, wait, well no. So that was kind of my overall feeling with it, was literally just what was laid out in this review. Like I said, I linked it below. I know I just read it completely for you. You're welcome, but I'm going to link it below too, because I really cannot add much more than what is already said in the book. Like I said, I gave this a 3 out of 5. Maybe I could see it as generous. I don't know. Maybe I have a little bit of like but it's like, it's Sam from iCarly, or I'm Glad My Mom Died was great. Yeah, but this book was, I read it, it came, it went. It was a quick read to get through, honestly. It's like, I'm trying to double check it. It's like, oh, well, it's actually a little under 300 pages, but like it reads quickly. Like if you read it, I wouldn't say I would encourage you to read it, but if you read it, you'll see what I mean. Like it moves quite quickly. But yeah, that's book 1 for March, and 10 for the year. That's what we're at. Book 2 for March, and this is book 11 for the year, is Holiday Ever After, a novel by Hannah Grace. This book, I've read 3 of Hannah Grace's books before. I have 2 here that I own. I read Icebreaker first, that came out in 2023. Wildfire came out in 2024, and then Daydream, that I don't have, came out the next year. I bought this book, I think kind of like on a whim. I think I might have heard about this on Book Talk, I don't know, or I like bought it at like Costco or something. And I remember like after I read this book, I liked this book a lot. I wasn't doing my like video reviews at this time. I started doing my video reviews the year I read this book. But I remember I bought this book because I was like, Icebreaker was so great. I will read Icebreaker. I mean, I will buy this book like in advance, like, because I like Icebreaker a lot. This book was less great for me. Daydream, I think, was like a little bit better, but Icebreaker was still the best in my opinion. But I said, oh, Hannah Grace has a new book out. Okay, like, similar to when I read like a book by Emily Henry, who I've read a few of her books by now and things like that. Like, she's a kind of similar author who I've read a few of her books at this point. I kind of know what the storyline's going to be. It's going to be someone getting together. There's some kind of problem. Like, see what's going on here. This book, honestly, to me, in this book, Holiday Ever After, the premise of the book is essentially like to this person who is her name is Clara Davenport. She works for her family's toy company, and essentially the book kind of starts in a time where the company that her family owns, it's like called like, it's like Davenport Toys or something like that. Davenport Toys, yeah. She works for that company, and they have basically stolen a doll from this other small company in this small little town, and it's like called Fraser Falls. So she kind of like gets put on the job, like, go fix this mess. Like, someone went on social media and basically was like, you know, lambasting the company. So she basically goes up to Fraser Falls, and it's like, okay, I gotta fix this. The first night she's there, it's like she gets in late, she goes to a bar and just like to get some food or whatever. She meets this guy, and what did we know? I mean, we knew, but she doesn't know that guy is actually the owner and creator of the company who idea was like stolen. He's not the guy Jack. He's not the guy who like made the video. Someone else did. It's a very tight-knit community, that kind of thing. And I remember I had just watched the movie You Got Mail, the Nora Ephron movie, before reading this book, like not even a week before. So I remember initially I was thinking like, this is very much giving You Got Mail, like kind of like your arch rival, you're like talking online or you're having this nice little night together, and then, oh, what do you know, you're my competitor. Because it basically was like they have this like night at the bar, they're like talking, it's like this great thing, they nothing happens, but the next morning she's like trying to go do her meeting, and then it's like, oh, you're the guy, oh, and it's like, oh, and then basically it kind of unfolds from there. Typical traditional, again, like I said, Hannah Gray story. If you read any of her books, you know, kind of like what's gonna be happening a little bit. It was fine. I gave it a 3.5 out of 5. Kind of just like standard. I will say this one is like, if you were to compare, like Icebreaker is quite, I feel like, explicit in a lot of the ways. Holiday Ever After, and I can't really remember that much with like Wildfire or Daydream, but this book is certainly less so. I mean, it's discussed, like them getting together or whatever, but it's not like Icebreaker was like a different kind of level, I feel like. And maybe that was like her coming onto the scene. I don't know if she had written things before then. I have no idea. Yeah, but I mean, kind of just like a basic, a little like, you know, have whatever. I actually was reading something else and I said, you know what? I need one of these like turn my brain off books. Let me just read this. And I read this one and I was like, great. I need something just to kind of like, you know, that there's so much going on. It's like, I need something just like easy and simple and like, you know, whatever, you know, here we go. And that's really what this book was. And if you want to read it, if you've read the previous Hannah Grace books before, why not keep going? She's kind of similar in a place for me, like at least right now. I mean, I feel less so than like with Emily Henry, let's say, where if Emily Henry comes up with a book or Taylor Jenkins Reid, I'm still waiting to get her new book that just came out. If one of them come out with the book, I've read like so many other books at this point, I'm gonna read whatever comes out next, like whatever, until like unless you do something that's like absolutely just horrible and I'm like, I can't come back, you can't come back from this, I'm probably gonna just read everything you put out. So just like keep writing it. And these books like this are good to have in times. Like I don't need to always read these crazy serious books all the time. So yeah, that was book 2 for March and book 11 for the year. And finally, the third book for March and the 12th book for the year is Harlem Rhapsody by Victoria Christopher Murray. Now you might recognize that name because I literally just read last month this book, The Personal Librarian, written by Victoria Christopher Murray, and also Marie Benedict, which is her like her pen name. Her actual name is like Heather Terrell or something like that, I think. I just read this book literally just last month, as in like in February it would be up there. And this was a part of the book club that I'm in, and someone mentioned, oh yeah, Harlem Rhapsody, and I was like, I feel like I had that book like written down as something I wanted to read. Let me go back and try to get that. And I remember like, I think in the midst of our book club meeting, I like pulled up my like library app to be like, okay, like let me see if I can get this book, and I was able to get it and read it over the the last little bit of March. This book, similar to how Personal Librarian is like dealing with the like unknown history of Belle DeCosta Green, who was the personal librarian of J.P. Morgan Chase. And this book is about like the unknown history basically of Jessie Redmond Fawcett, who was the literary editor and prominent Negro of the prominent Negro magazine, The Crisis, and who is the founder and editor of that magazine is W.E.B. Du Bois. This was quite interesting to learn about this woman because similar to how Belle DeCosta Green was for me, like I didn't know anything about her. And it was like so many, you think about like these hidden figures, these people who like don't get publicity, don't get like books written about them or stories about them. A lot of times it's women, of course, just from that time period, especially Black women or people of color. Being able to learn about her and be like, oh wow, she actually was quite accomplished, and like I don't really know much about her at all. And to be fair, I don't know much about W.E.B. Du Bois as well. Like I've read his book Souls of Black Folk. I've read several like things that maybe he's written, if not full books and things like that. But I didn't know anything about like this magazine, The Crisis. I didn't know about a lot of these things. And honestly, a little bit with me, and I really like how, I don't think I still have the book on my Kindle, but in the end of the book, I might have highlighted some of it or wanted to save some of it. Let me see if I did to write it down, because the author here, at the end of the book, she really kind of lays out, she's like, let me say, by the way, like my author's note, like we took some liberties here, and let me tell you why. And in the places where we didn't take liberties, let me tell you like what happened, or if we changed this or that slightly, like let me explain like what I was thinking and that whole kind of thing, which I really appreciated. And one of those pinpoints was we're dealing with, yes, Jesse Redmond Fawcett, who like is the focal point of this book, but I know we're dealing with like a very big piece of the life of W.E.B. Du Bois. These two people did have an affair, and apparently this was like known, and apparently he had multiple affairs as well. That's kind of touched on a little bit in the book, but like, you know, we don't really like spend a bunch of time on there because it's like we're focused on Jesse here. But it was it was like, I understand I have to be delicate with, I'm not trying to write a book and it wasn't like the book at all was even like a book to be like, you know, like he sucks or whatever like that. But obviously you're talking about a man who, you know, was unfaithful and was all these different things, and kind of like digging into his life more just outside of just like the great, like, you know, activist and like writer and historian and all these kind of things that he was. So I really appreciated like how she like laid out. I just checked, I don't have it actually still. Let me see. I'm trying to see if I highlighted anything. I feel like I might have, because I really like that. So if you read this book, I would recommend, as always, read the author's note, because it gives good context if you happen to try to get an insight to like what they're thinking. All that to say, I give this a 3.5 out of 5. This book for me, I feel like, and it could partly be just kind of just like where I am. I still kind of am in a little bit at the time in terms of like trying to like stay like involved in the books that I'm like reading and things like that. I've been quite just like slower on like my like actually like finishing books, and like not like, I guess not, I don't want to say like finishing books, because there's only been one book that I've kind of started like so far this year and then I kind of put away, basically, if I'm trying to remember correctly. But I've had like kind of like a general kind of just like slump in terms of like being excited to read some of the text, and it isn't even just necessarily about like I'm not picking good things, because I feel like this is a, you know, obviously I just read Personal Librarian, that was great. I feel like this was a good book as well, even though I only gave it a 3.5 out of 5 as my rating, which it could probably, because I don't necessarily, I would maybe do 3.75, but I try to do like 0.5. And anyways, because I'm just comparing it to like the last book, like I wouldn't have it on the same playing field really, but I don't know. I've been kind of in this like where I'm kind of like up and down with things, and this book did have times where it did lose me, and I don't necessarily think that's maybe because of the timing of things, but I do think maybe a little bit of like that. At some point I was kind of just like, all right, like where are we landing this plane, or like what's exactly happening here, or like whatnot, and kind of like some of the things were kind of going a little bit. I also want to back up quickly on the whole W.E.B. Du Bois of it all. I honestly, if I did know what W.E.B. stood for, I you know, people say W.E.B. they don't say Webb Du Bois, because it's W.E.B. is like initials for something. If I knew what those stood for, I had not remembered or thought about that in a very long time, because in this book, obviously, Jesse Redmond Fawcett knows him on a personal level, so she's always calling him William or Will. And I remember in the beginning of the book, I was kind of just like, wait, she keeps calling this guy Will, and it's throwing me off. Like, who is Will? Like, I knew who it was, but I knew who it was, but I was just like, she's talking about W.E.B. Du Bois. Okay, like, the name is William Edward Burghardt Du Bois. Or Dubois, some people like to say. Depends on who you're hanging around with, or where they're from, whatnot. Yeah, I remember that was one thing with the book where I was kind of like, okay, like, this is Jesse. Jesse calls him Will. I don't know him as Will. I'm trying to remember, like, okay, this is W.E.B. Like, this is W.E.B. She's talking about Will. Okay. Yeah, so I would, like I said, read the author's note if you get the book. I wish I had it, like, highlighted some. I feel like I would have highlighted it, but maybe I just didn't say it for me. Who knows? Because that was something I was like, right away, I was like, I like how she laid this out. And they did the same thing, Victoria and Marie Benedict did the same thing in Personal Librarian, kind of laying out, let me tell you, like, what happened if we change some dates, yada yada, because obviously these are real people. And it's a historical fiction piece, yes, but it is, like, very much sourced from real life. One other thing I want to say about this book, too, is obviously Harlem Rhapsody. So you're talking a lot about, like, the Harlem Renaissance time, and obviously the influence that Jesse Redmond Fawcett had in that time, but also so many other people who were involved, like Langston Hughes. We meet him in this book. Nella Larson, who is in this book, and is the writer of the excellent book Passing, I've talked about a couple times. I remember when her character came up in the book, I was like, hey. I was like, wait a minute. I was like, I know this lady. And I was like, oh, this is... like, oh yeah, like right away I was like, oh, awesome. And like kind of like some of the route she took in terms of like before like the book came out and things like that, and like before even getting to that stage, and it wasn't even like it was like really even, that wasn't even said in the book, like, oh yeah, she later wrote Pasty, like it wasn't, but I remember just being like, hey, like it's like seeing a friend, it's like, hey, I know you, like great, like, you know, and obviously Langston Hughes is in there, so it was like very much like, you know, Harlem Renaissance, these great people coming out in that time, and so many of the great works that came out in that time, in that period, and like even just general like the life of Harlem, and trying to like, imagine that and bring yourself into that period, and like, you know, this is we're like starting like 1919, 1919 around then, so like that kind of period, interesting to read about to some level, definitely for sure. But yeah, those are the 3 books I read in March 2026. I realized all 3 of them started with an H. The last one, my last book in February, started with an H as well. So that's a bunch of H's for you. That's lovely. Yeah, I have this book that's right there. I'm going to try to finish this in the next like day or 2. I'm almost through it with it. And I have some other ones I'm going to try to get through. It's Poetry Month in April. So I have a poetry book that I need to read. It's longer than I thought it was going to be. A lot of them, sometimes poetry books you think are shorter, but it's longer than I thought. But I got to read it like before the next like week and a half for my book club. So anyway, send me your recommendations. Follow me on Goodreads. Follow me on Storygraph. All the things on the onlines. Give me recommendations, like I said. Anything else you're thinking about? Have you read any of these books? Have you read any of these previous books that I mentioned as well? Especially, like I said, Personal Librarian, I definitely recommend for people as well, but really especially I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jennette McCurdy. Definitely read that. I know this was in the book we were talking about in this video, but read that book. That book is great. And also, if you want to just have like a steamy book to read Icebreaker, you know, why the hell not? All right. Thank you guys. Have a great night. Have a great morning, whatever time this is you're watching. We will see you guys in the next video. Peace.